Good afternoon and welcome to the Society of Wetland Scientists' first webinar of 2021. We are going to be talking about the Pontanal, a heated dialogue, what's next after major fires have impacted more than 30% of the wetland, which will be presented by Rafaela Nicola and Catia Cunha. And my name is Kim Ponzio. I'm a past president for SWS and the past chair of the SWS webinar committee. And I'm pleased to moderate this webinar today and engage you in an e-learning experience with SWS during a time when many of us are looking for those virtual opportunities to stay engaged. And this is one way that we can stay connected to the wetland community during the global pandemic, and we hope you all are well. Okay, I seem to be in the wrong place. Here we go. Thank you, Jordan. Okay, for those of you who are not as familiar with our SWS webinar series, our monthly webinars are held on the third Thursday of the month at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And as you can see on this listing of our upcoming webinars, we have both our regular SWS webinars series in English, and also we have quarterly webinars offered in Spanish, which are open to members and non-members alike. Our webinars are also posted to the our YouTube channel for free viewing. And we have an amazing library of over 60 different webinars that are really getting a lot of playtime these days during the last year. Another expansion of our program is the development of wetland interviews. So make sure you keep that on your radar. We are proud to recognize our SWS webinar series sponsors for 2021. And first up, we have the Whittington Group, which is a natural resource consulting firm that balances regulatory compliance with sound ecological management. Also, we'd like to recognize In Situ, which is monitoring equipment and software that works together to make it easier and more cost-effective to collect, access, and manage data on water levels, water quality, water flow, and more. And WildNote, which is a field data collection app for environmental professionals that streamlines the process of collecting, managing, and reporting environmental data so you can work smarter, not harder. So please do visit, like, and follow our SWS webinar sponsors for 2021. Now, while we had a successful first year of webinar sponsorship in 2020, we have just 2 sponsorship slots left for 2021. Webinar sponsors receive recognition in webinar promotional items, including emails and advertisement on the SWS webinars webpage, verbal recognition during our live webinars, like you just heard, and sustained exposure from on-demand webinars. The annual sponsorship rate is just $1,000 for the entire year, so please do contact Jordan as soon as possible to partner with SWS to bring important and relevant information to the wetland community. Since January 2018, we've gone through the process of having our SWS webinars pre-approved by the SWS Professional Certification Program as being applicable for continuing education credits. And these credits can be applied to your professional wetland scientist certification or renewal or other certifications that you might hold. We have applied for that pre-approval for this webinar as well. And it does seem even more important now during this pandemic to gather as many CEUs as you can from online and virtual training sessions like the SWS webinars. You can get participation certificates for watching the webinars in their entirety, and those are available through an automated process. You'll receive an email from our SWS Managing Director, Michelle Chosek, about 1 day after the webinar, so please do check your spam email if you don't see that. And these certificates are free to SWS members. Participation certificates are also available for those who watch the webinar recordings, and that can be found on our events calendar page, as you see here, on our new website, or on the YouTube channel, complete with multilingual captions. So before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. The general format for today's webinar is a 45-minute presentation by our 2 speakers, followed by approximately 15 minutes of questions and answers. And all attendees are muted during the entire webinar. And I just want to remind our speakers to make sure they mute their microphones and turn off their video cameras when they're not speaking. The question and answers, if you have a question, you can type that in the Q&A button shown here, not the chat button. That's going to be reserved for technical difficulties that the SWS staff will monitor. And at any time during the presentation, you can type those questions in the Q&A button, and participants may upvote the questions that you'd like to see answered earlier. And since we have 2 speakers, I would like it very much if you'd indicate whom you'd like the question to be asked. And we can include both speakers in those questions, so make sure you indicate that. And then as your moderator, I will be posing the questions that I receive in the Q&A pane to our speakers at the end of their presentations. And then finally, a survey should pop up at the end of the Zoom meeting. And please do fill that out and give us your feedback about today's webinar and the SWS webinar program. And also please indicate if you'd like to do an SWS webinar later in the 2021 year for our SWS webinar series. So with that, it's my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce our speakers today. Rafaela Nicola is currently the head of office for Wetlands International Brazil, coordinating the Pontanal component of the Corridor Azul program, which is a 10-year initiative aimed at safeguarding the health and connectivity of the Paraná-Paraguay wetland systems. She is the technical and scientific director for the non-governmental organization MUPON, Women in Action for the Pantanal, and represents the ICCA Consortium, Indigenous Peoples and Community Conserved Territories and Areas in Brazil, where she bridges local and traditional knowledge for promoting indigenous rights. She's a member of the Happiness Center of Bhutan and the World Wetlands Network. And for more than 20 years, she's been coordinating social and environmental initiatives at the Plate River Basin, with emphasis on wetland conservation, local well-being, and environmental justice. From 2004 to 2011, she participated in the Brazilian National Wetlands Council, and from 2005 to 2009, she was in the Council of the Pontanal Research Center, representing civil society organizations. Rafaela received her bachelor's degree in ecology at Paulista State University in Brazil, a Master of Science in Ecology and Conservation at the Federal University of Mato Grosso, Brazil, and she also received specialized training on leadership processes for transition at the United Nations University and Leadership Academy and by the Right Livelihood Program from Schumacher College. Catia Cunha, who holds a PhD in Ecology and Conservation of Natural Resources, and she has conducted postdoctorate work in wetland ecology at Max-Planck Institute for Limnology, Tropical Ecology Group in Germany. She is a former professor at the Department of Botany and Ecology, Institute of Biosciences at the Federal University of Mato Grosso. Presently, Catia is associate researcher at UFMT, and she's also a research coordinator of the Associated Biodiversity and Wetland Management Laboratory of the National Institute of Science and Technology in Wetlands. She is a researcher at the Pontanal Research Center and is responsible for the scientific basis to support the conservation and wise use of the Pontanal. She's an advisor for MUPON as well, and Women in Action for the Pontanal, and for the Brazil Office of Wetlands International, working as a consultant on the Corridor Azul program together with Rafaela. She was a member of the Scientific Organizing Committee of the 8th International Wetland Conference held in 2008 in Brazil, an organizing member and scientific committee member of the National Congress of Wetlands. And Catia contributed to the development of scientific basis for the identification and characterization of Brazilian wetlands and the classification of macro habitats of the Pontanal. And her field of study is the ecology of wetland vegetation, which I very much appreciate because that is mine as well. And she is actively engaged in efforts for conservation, sustainable management, and political scientific visibility for wetlands, especially in the Pontanal. So with that, I'd like to hand over control to Rafaela, and welcome to Rafaela and Catia.
Okay. Thank you so much, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Hope you're all well and in good health. So I'll start my presentation. I chose to start the presentation with an inspirational image. I think we all could make good use of it. But the fires in the Pantanal have been violent, devastating. It has provoked loss of fauna, water scarcity. It has left communities without houses or food and affected the local economy with losses to cattle ranchers, to tourism, and to the municipalities, losses on health. And many people have fought the fires. Many people have come to provide aid and emergency assistance. However, the extension and the intensity of these fires have been just tremendous. The catastrophic situation that was faced in the Pantanal has been well divulged in the media. So I will refrain to share even more pictures or overflow on the disaster side of the fires. Instead, I want to invite you for us all to use this moment to look forward into the future and for together looking into possibilities on how can we avoid this scenario to repeat itself in the coming years. So moving on. Sorry, I'm just, okay. Wetlands International, just want to share a little bit about the work of Wetlands International in the region. We are currently developing a program called the Corredor Azul program, connecting people, nature, and economy along the Paraná-Paraguay fluvial system. And as you see on the right side of the screen, this region accounts for the largest free-flowing fluvial system in the world, encompassing iconic wetlands through Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, and Uruguay. It's a 10-year program supported by the DOB Ecology, and it involves 3 organizations, 3 offices from Wetlands International, and also an array of collaborators. We are working at 3 focal areas besides the regional approach, which are the Pantanal up here in green, then the Esteiro de Iberá, and the Delta of Paraná down in the southern part in Argentina. So this program has four main pillars, which are basically knowledge development, mobilization of civil society and various actors, policy influencing, and also field developing initiatives that can be upscaled or replicated. We have specific expected impacts for this 10-year span, which includes the contribution to 30 community groups for improving well-being and income through wetland-derived income and adaptation to climate change. Also some cross-cutting approaches, which also embraces promoting better legal frameworks for wetlands, and also promoting multi-stakeholder dialogue platforms and consultation spaces. And under wetlands health, we are working on 10 key protected areas along the whole system, with an aim of protecting 1 million hectares with key wetland systems under more sustainable management processes. So a little bit about the dynamic of the Pantanal that we were used to have. No, the Pantanal is guided by what we call a flooding pulse, which is the driving force and the fundamental ecological factor for the Pantanal landscape. And it's normally predictable, monomodal, and has a pronounced aquatic and terrestrial phase that alternates annually. Here in the left side, you can see in this graphic the demonstration of the high water period during in the northern part of the Pantanal, and how it differs normally on from the southern part of the Pantanal. This has to do with the time that the water takes to reach the further southern part of the Pantanal and to flood this area very slowly in a normal process. And as you see here, there's a map of the Pantanal. The green the green areas are the highlands on the upper Paraguay River basin, and then the gray is the Pantanal. And there's a very straight and important connection between the upperland and the lowland. I'm sorry for my English, and in which there's quite a lot of pressure from the upperland where the waterbornes are for the increase of soy and grain production, which is affecting also the Pantanal and also deforestation in the Pantanal itself. So moving on, why is 2020 different from previous periods that we have known? As we see here on this map, the fires and the drought has not affected only the Pantanal, but the whole Paraná-Paraguay wetland system. This red zone here is actually accounts for the whole system from the Pantanal in Brazil to Paraná Delta in Argentina. This whole area has suffered from extreme drought, high intense winds, and also large intense fires. So finally coming to the Pantanal, what happened in 2020 that called so much attention? 30% of the area in the Pantanal has burned. This accounts for 4.5 million hectares of land. It's a country in itself. And it has beat a record over the past 22 years. This is a situation that has hardly ever seen before, especially the intensity of the fires, the resurface of these fires. And here on the right side, you can see a map that has been produced by the LASA department. It's the Department of monitoring, satellite monitoring. And you see on the pink patches are refer to the areas that have been affected by the fires in 2020. And the areas that are marked in blue are the conservation units, and the green are the indigenous land. So you see that the conservation units in the Pantanal have been highly affected by the fires, but also, of course, private lands have been affected as well. And there's a whole discussion about the origins of the fires, and it really became even a political discussion. So here we can see how the fires have evolved in the whole year from January to December of 2020. And the fire focus, but normally January to March are rainy periods, so we don't have so much fires, and practically during the whole year we had fires, which will probably continue on in 2021 with a little bit of relief that we had in these current months that we're receiving some rain. So in terms of future dynamics, what can we expect in the Pantanal, and how can we prepare better for what is coming? So what we see happening is that there is, of course, a natural element to the fires, which has to do with the La Nina coming. We are we're just finishing an El Nino period and starting a La Nina, which is a period which could be one of the main causes of the most severe drought on the Upper Paraguay River basin since 1960. Also, human-oriented actions are keeping the temperature level even higher than usual. And we see that there's, for the first time, we are facing very severe situations of water scarcity, which even contributes even more to the fires to continue. Here on the right side, you can see that the level of the water in one point of the river in the Paraguay, the water measures over the past 5 years, and this lower line in brown refers to 2020, where you see a huge difference of water level, and this accounts in all the measuring points along the Paraguay River. So it was the warmest record in 2020. Well, besides the natural phenomenon of the fires, we need to also discuss the power imbalance. 93% of the Pantanal is private land, and only 5% is under protection, under one or other different category of protection, and less than 2% is indigenous areas. Down on the southern part of the Pontanal here, you see a large path in green, which is the Catia indigenous land. It's one of the areas which we are working directly. So when we look at this power imbalance, there's a huge need to discuss the fires with private landowners, but also there's a huge need to leverage this discussion, to bring the other actors into the discussions as well, so they can be part of the decision. So why is it a heated dialogue? Well, first, the cultural aspects. Fire is culturally used at the Pantanal to tame the pasture, but also is being used for cleaning new areas and opening new areas illegally for cattle raising and for monoculture, such as soy or sugarcane. Also, the legislation, there's a legislation gap. Also, the legal framework that we have very poorly consider wetlands specificalities. Most of the knowledge that we have in Brazil and the experience regarding fire management refers to forest fire and not to wetland fires. So there's really a need to build information, to build knowledge regarding fires on wetlands and the behavior of fires on wetlands in the Pantanal. We see peat fires, underground under soil fires, resurfacing, which make the control even harder. Also, there has been major budget cuts and reducing of the monitoring in the region, which has contributed to the disaster that we see. The pandemic has also been one cause of difficulty, since less people were circulating in the Pantanal, such as tourists and other actors. So we want to address our eyes into moving beyond the emergency situation that has arisen, although it's very important, and and we are still developing actions regarding the emergency situation. But we are really looking into how can we address for the coming future. No? So Wetlands International, together with several partners, have developed a position paper which was broadly divulged in Brazil to governmental authorities. And basically, we proposed the establishment of a reference body functioning as an advisory and multi-stakeholder intelligence for preventing, management, combat, and adaptation recommendations, also for developing scenario and risk analysis so that we can prepare for the fires. Promote multi-stakeholder inclusiveness and mediatory approaches, among other measures. One of the measures that we find highly, extremely important is the enhancement of the knowledge and also the structure of the knowledges that are scattered along different institutions, not only in the Pantanal, but also collaborating with international researchers and organizations. So moving on, we do also, besides the debates that we are promoting, we have field initiatives that are now looking also into restoration. One is being developed at the Sesc Pantanal Ramsar site, which is the largest private reserve in Brazil, accounting for 108,000 hectares, which is around 1% of the whole wetland of the Pantanal in the Brazilian side. It's quite a lot. And it's the, well, largest private reserve in the whole country. Although there has been a lot of great effort to try to contain the fires at this Ramsar site, 90% of the area has been affected. So that's why we are prioritizing restoration in this area together with the Sesc coordination and with CPP and INAU, led by Catia Nunes, who will speak soon. And also another initiative that we are developing is a community-based participatory initiative at the Cajuel Indigenous Territory. Cajuel Indigenous Territory is one of the largest indigenous territories in Brazil, accounting for 538,000 hectares, and it has 1,200 inhabitants. So I will talk more about the Cajuel, and Catia will lead on the discussion about the macro habitat approach. Well, this is one issue that I want to just to mention very briefly here is that the COVID together with the fire has been a terrible mixture, making the communities even more vulnerable. So it has made us, together with several organizations, to look into emergency aids for local communities who have become, well, without provision and food or their areas for croppings. So there has been some actions in terms of emergency aid, but we are really looking into long-stand actions with resilient community, wetland communities. So I want to talk a little bit about the Cajuel case. So at the Cajuel, this really fantastic region, we are supporting the mobilization of a community fire brigade. So you see here the brave men that compose this fire brigade, and they are only 14 actually, and we want to expand that. They are using their local knowledge also to develop restoration measures, and we are helping to systematize this knowledge and supporting, besides the fire combat, supporting their work through a nursery that has been built in the region, the collection of seeds and plant species for elaborating a species bank. And we are restoring together with them their main spring, which is their main source of water for water security. And we are aiming towards 100 hectares for start of restored area through local knowledge. So the idea, although this is a small project, we are systematizing this to replicate in other areas in which the communities have been facing lack of food and vulnerability. So also coming to the SESC Ramsar site, our approach to large wetland management, restoration, and climate change adaptation. We are working with a preliminary assessment on the extent and implications of the fires over wetland ecosystems through a project supported by Jeff for 24 months. And also then which Catia will talk more about, it's the development of a protocol for wetland restoration using macro habitat approach jointly with INAU and CPP. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed, and I'm moving on to Catia. Thanks.
So I wonder, Catia was having some potential problems with internet. Catia, can you unmute? I'm not sure if she's controlling the slides or not. So Jordan, are you controlling the slides, or is that Catia that's got the pointer?
Catia, if you're able to unmute yourself, and then we can continue on with the presentation.
Okay.
Perfect. We hear you, Catia.
Is possible to look me?
We cannot see you right now, but if you're having difficulties with your video, we can hear you. So that would be okay if the video is a difficulty.
I don't know where's the place for return my video. It's closed all.
It should be down on the left-hand side next to the mute button. You should say start video or stop video. It should be down on the Zoom screen, not on your presentation screen. If you can't find, there you go, you got it. Excellent. We can see you now and we can hear you.
Do you see me? Is possible? It's okay?
Yeah. Yes, I see you. Do you hear me?
Okay, though I don't see you.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. I am happy to meet with in this webinar of SWS. Don't change the oh, thank you. Only me. It's okay. Wetland International Brazil promotes the new approach for large wetlands, the macro habitats concept, in order to synthesize and summarize the complexity of components from the Pantanal environment. Nunes da Cunha e Jung 2016 proposes the macro habitat classification for the Pantanal. It aims to facilitate the planning and the comparative scientific study, form of sustainable use, and the level of protection and post-fire restoration. The traditional people community has name for all places where they live. that support us to develop this approach. Between the conservationist and the rural producers have a question: how to use the landscape in Pantanal, and what to protect in the Pantanal different landscape. So we justify, why is macrohabitat a necessary landscape unity for comparative scientific studies, developed and application of specific management methods, environmental impact analysis, specific environment legislation, e atual case study in Brazil is the Pantanal of Mato Grosso. The Pantanal needs one specific law because it is a large wetland and the Brazilian laws ignore the aquatic phase. The Brazilian law is for terrestrial ecosystem. The macrohabitats is a landscape unity subject to the similar inundation and covered with a specific vegetation characteristic. Normally is upper vegetation. Nunes da Cunha et al. Indicated for the Pantanal 68 macrohabitats, but see you produce inventory, probably this number is potentially to grow up. With that, we have a scientific base for the Pantanal federal law. The Corredor Azul program adopted this concept for two pilot projects. The first project is about the Ramsar sites. Brazil does not have a good script or protocol to develop the management plans for Ramsar sites. For this reason, Wetland International included in your program the creation of a model for management plans based on chronology of wetland, for introduce reference concepts of wetland apply to planning and management, introduce the concept of macrohabitat to determine the environmental heterogeneity of the site and to identify the ecosystem services, threats, and restoration, rare and dangerous species sites. For this project, we started to map the small macro habitat. The small macro habitat, for example, in this figure, and this is, she shows a small grassland macro habitats. It's very special and it needed to be highlighted. It is occur inside the tropical dry forest. There are two floras. Small flora occur, one flora occur during the flood period and another during the dry phase. When inventoried, its ecological value appear. It's very important. The project 2 is about the restoration of macro habitats. The first idea was how to restore the different Pantanal macro habitats to adapt to climate change. Also improve our tools and prepare nurseries, create seed bank, because in North Pantanal don't have this initiative. So in this date not correct. In the last year, in my office, my group was what happened to our forest. The first time you visit is all okay. When we start the the segundo field assessment, our forest burned. What to do? We immediately had a change priority. We adaptive management, we have defined the place most destroyed by the fires. The impact is very strong. Some tree, only the etiquette for the presence of, shows the presence of a tree because it is destroy complete the tree. Everyone was alarmed by last year's fire, but since 2004, Nunes da Cunha e Jung hypothesized that multi-year cycle led to vegetation dynamics. This is a multi-dry years, multi-dry years, multi-normal years, and now is the last humid period. During the humid period, the humidity-friendly plants species advance in the field, grow up, and during the dry periods and the fire, they retract. So this is a special dynamic in the Pantanal. But this year, with the fire very strong, Oscar, the wet cycle is over, starting a new cycle very dry with fire. Will a dry cycle start? This not answer, because these years, the number of points of fire is very intensive, different the other years. But it's impossible to define exactly what the origin of this, what is this effect of what? Is a temperature oscillations in the ocean, El Niño, El Niña, and the synergy with the Amazonia deforestations is not as clear, because the information about the oscillation ocean effect, not there are a poor material. We promote restoration based on this step. The first needed to different information about the region or the point target, soil information, inundation information, vegetation, about the people's traditional people in the region, the management in the last years, etc. The second step needed to map the object macro habitat target. Now is riverside forest. Step 3, you need assessment of vegetation, information about the flora, threats, conservation status, and the principal, the species distribution in the flood gradient. In step 4, peculiarities of each macro habitat, for example, interactions is very important. Along the rivers, there is not a way forest, only forest riverine. The map of the area is a macro habitats along the Cuiabá rivers in the SESC, RPPN SESC Pantanal, a private conservation unit. Our interest is riverine forest. Is more targeted for restoration, but there are scrublands, this color, flooded dominant forest by Volquesia divergence. There are flooded grassland, and there are swamps. So are different macro habitats, and this macro habitat you need each one has its restoration strategy is different between the microhabitats. The field assessment is very important to assess the plant, the community. We have shown that a few centimeters each can define the plant distribution. 3 represent the history of time for decades and having hundreds. It's possible to define the group of species is live in high level of inundation, and there are more species live in area not flood all years. Is a characteristic of the Pantanal because it's a savanna region, is a position in the Central South America. So there are predominance of dry forest, savanna forest, of course. So this is possible. The study in the paleodike is possible to define the groups of plants in different positions of the gradient. The elevation map will define the planting zones because do you have the groups of plant prefer the position in the gradient, and do you need to know the gradient in elevation map for define the plant zones. We'll verify some species specialized in areas de high flooding, eles prefer intermediate levels, and the other not flood areas. Então, in this case, the yellow is a high level of inundation, orange intermediate flooded, there are, and red, a little flood or only in special years the flood. Is different in the places. So it's needed to know exactly what happened in different places for you promote the restoration. These forests are important for fishery production in the Pantanal. Fish are running out of food due to forest degradation. The research project led by Jill Anderson and Sandra Correa, United States Research, with our collaboration, produce information about the relationship between fish and flooded forest. So there are the fish and plants interaction. 10 fish species studied, and 33 potential plant species for recovery flood forest. So this is 33 plants is very special for this restoration. And the other group is for the promote the diversity, and the others for organize or occupy the space in the site, restored site. This experience, there are only 1 year, 2 years the first project, and 1 year this project. And with the COVID, this COVID and the fire in Poconé, in Pantanal, it's very difficult to work in this area. This experience, this signaled us that we can success in the restorate uses the macro-habitat concepts because it brings practical benefits. For example, description and the quantification of specific resource for humans. How plants is important for the humans. Determination of the main threats is very important. Now this year was fire, but in the last year is the farmings and the fisheries use the dike and the different is used for for camp, and this destroys the vegetation, impacts the vegetation. Determination of resilient to environmental change and the human impact, including climate change. Basis for legislation governing the management and the protection of the different macrohabitats. For example, the swamps was impossible to destroy for transform in cattle pasture, because this point is very, very important for the Pantanal. Is high spot importante because it's possible to promote the bank of seed, is possible to promote the reconstruction of different kind, principal grassland and the swamp. And finally, it's possible to use practical benefits to restoration. Thank you. See you.
Thank you both, Rafaela and Catia. Really very interesting presentation and pretty thought-provoking about the knowledge base that you're trying to gain to restore these wetlands. I was unaware of the impacts that the fires had, and I'm curious about some more things too, and I'll ask a question while I'm waiting for folks to go ahead and put something in the Q&A. So I encourage everybody to type their questions in the Q&A pane. And in the meantime, again, I will be asking any of the upvoted questions in the Q&A first. And if you forget to ask a question, or you have to leave early, or we don't get to your question, please do email the presenters at these email addresses on this slide. And let's go ahead and get started. So one thing I did want to know about before I get to some of my other questions was, are there any disease vectors in the areas that have had this widespread tree mortality that is causing a problem and may cause a problem for restoration of those species to the area? Can either one of you answer that question? And I'm thinking something like a beetle or insect damage to the trees once they've had tree mortality.
For me or for Rafaela?
Either one of you, either one of you.
I think about the diseases promote the animals is very difficult to understand, because in Pantanal don't have a good study about this. The insect in the tree not is good problem for mortality in the tree, because the first evaluation about this thematic feel to use this plant. Of course, there are, but not destroyed. What destroys the tree in the Pantanal is the fire. The fire is the problem. Either is a deforestation for use different places, and for cattle pasture, for example. And the Pantanal, we need to see the Pantanal for 200 times there are peoples in this place, the European peoples, but the last until there are traditional people, Indian people. So the Pantanal today, we agree, is a cultural landscape, because they use it, transform the landscape in this cycle, pluriannual cycle, define the different kind of field or forest, flooded forest, not dry tropical forest or savanna forest, principally the flooded forest.
Rafaela, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, can I just chip in very quickly on this? I think this is a very important question, because we are facing an unseen imbalance in the Pantanal through these fires, and we still have to wait to see what will surface, what will emerge. And well, there's already some discussions about the spread of specific diseases that can contaminate plants, and there's very little knowledge about this so far because the situation is just very new. But one issue about diseases, which is not related to wild diseases or pests, but is the spread of dengue, of dengue, chikungunya, and Zika, and also the spread of the COVID as well. The COVID specifically, well, we had suffered a phenomenon that is like the trade between solidarity and COVID. The solidarity movement that has arisen in facing of the fires, with so many people coming to the region and trying to help, but not using any biosecurity measures, has increased a lot of in terms of numbers of people, indigenous people that became contaminated by COVID and has died of COVID. So this is a serious, like, human issue that has not been taken into account, maybe by the goodwill and by the intensity of the problem that has urged people to come to the region, but at the same time, communities that were trying to safeguard themselves and maintain away from others have become contaminated very suddenly, and the spread was very quick. It was as quick as the fire.
Thank you for that. And I think that as we're seeing, the pandemic has exacerbated problems that were, that were some problems that were maybe human caused or natural forces. And it's definitely not equitable across the socioeconomic boundaries either. And so the people that are most affected by it are probably the least poised to be able to address those changes. So I do appreciate that. We're getting close on time, and we do have two questions, and I want to have the first one that was upvoted to have this one answered first. Are there any studies about how much carbon dioxide was released by fires in the Pantanal, or how much biomass was lost until now? And Catia, did you say that you'd be able to answer that one?
For firing in this year, don't have information. So far, it has not been happened. Next year, we will have information about the biomass lost of the flooded forest, because we have the permanent plot, the ecological study long term in this area as a fire destroy the vegetation. Então, the next year, you produce this information, it's possible to dar uma idea de what biomass is lost, but CO2 don't have this information. But not only forest is important, the situation. The more important situation in the Pantanal post-fire is because the fire concentrated in areas the soil, organic soil. Not only forest destroy, but this organic soil is very important. But I think there are some groups in Corumbá, in Brapa, I think this group study the CO2. I don't exactly, but I think there are this group, because to measure the biomassa, esse soil biomass.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think one of the things that we are becoming more and more aware of with climate change is trying to keep the CO2 that is in the forest, both in the vegetative matter and the soils there, as opposed to creating new wetlands or restoring wetlands, that's the best place to capture and sequester that carbon. And so I think that's really important. And, you know, if it weren't for COVID, I think there'd be a lot of people rushing down there right now to start doing some research on your areas. And I want to offer too that we use in Florida, we use fire management on a regular basis in our wetlands. And that could be something that there are groups of people that may email you and offer you information to work with you internationally on how you might even back model what you used to have there. And so I think maybe that could be helpful. Let me get to one more question. We have a question about, are there collaborations with Paraguay and or Bolivia with their NGOs or their government about addressing these issues of the fires in the Pantanal?
Well, I can take this question. Yes, there are collaborations, but in terms of formal collaboration among the governments, it doesn't flow well. There's sensitivity issues regarding national security, national sovereignty. So there's little information being swapped, being exchanged, or joint collaboration for this. The collaboration works much more on the level of interaction between research institutions and NGOs. And we are trying to push for a stronger platform of collaboration between the three countries. Right now, there's the Pantanal Observatorium, in which there are NGOs from Brazil, Bolivia, and Paraguay present. Wetlands International supports this initiative, and several research institutions collaborate to the Pantanal Observatorium. It still needs to gain strength, and I think there's a need to structure better the information and the exchanges that we can have. There's a huge potential there that still needs to be better explored.
Excellent, excellent answer. I mean, I think that it's all about getting people communicating. And if you can't do it at the government level, then NGOs and the scientists are the place to start. And I think you mentioned something about putting a position paper together early in your talk, Rafaela. Could you tell us a little bit about that, how you cooperated to do that?
Yes, we have the position paper is available. I can send it to anyone who's interested. It has been developed with support from CPP, Research Center of the Pontanal, with INAU, and also with local organizations, and shared through the Pantanal Observatorium. So organizations in Bolivia and Paraguay has also chipped in. Mm-hmm. And basically, this document is serving as a guide for demanding on specific policies, or for under the public ministry and the national public ministry in Brazil, but mm-hmm. It's also being put to discussion in Paraguay and Bolivia.
Right, right. Okay. Well, we are a little bit over time. So maybe if you can, Rafaela, I don't know if you have the link handy, you could put it in the chat so folks could get it. If not, you can certainly email Rafaela to have her provide that position paper link to you. And so I do want to, before we sign off, I have a couple of announcements. So first, I want to go ahead and let me get control. I am now in control. Okay. So I want to make you aware of our next 2 webinars coming up. We have one in February about the assessing vegetative species recolonization of commercial cranberry bogs, and a Spanish webinar in March about, and I'm not even going to try to say that, the let me see if I can get this, Cienques wetlands. Did I do okay, you guys? And so that will be in Spanish. And of course, that is open to members and non-members alike. And if you would, please subscribe to any of our social media channels like Facebook and LinkedIn to keep informed about SWS and support our society. Also, we have a YouTube channel where all of our webinars are posted 3 months after their original broadcast with multilingual subtitles. And more recently, we have our wetland interviews. And if you go to the resources tab, you'll see wetland interviews there. And we have 2 in English and 3 in Spanish posted on our YouTube page. And you can quickly link to those in that resources tab. And also, if you're Spanish speaking, you be certain to subscribe to the Latin America region and Caribbean region's Facebook page at the link listed here. And so finally, thank you again to Catia and Rafaela for your wonderful presentation and very enlightening presentation on the Pontanal. And thank you to our webinar sponsors, again, reminding you that we have 2 slots open if you want to be a sponsor for 2021. And also thank you to our audience for participating today. So please have a wonderful day and stay well.